So maybe we can just go straight into the our conversation. And I would also want to thank the National Art Gallery Namibia for agreeing to be part of this conversation, which is joined by a colleague that I've known for so many years, Desiree. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I think these conversations are absolutely necessary to be having. They are. I think we can learn from each other, and I think information sharing is essential. And also just to let people know what we are doing amidst this phase, I think it is important. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So basically, our conversation is going to be centered around cultural work in timeless times, in trying times. I would like to simplify it that way. And since the gallery has been open since April, can you tell us how you have been able to deal with your audience coming in?
Maybe just to give a bit of a background to that, we were locked down literally over a weekend. When our president just said, okay, well, this is the 16th, nobody goes to work, it's a complete lockdown. So we had no way to kind of like think through this, how we gonna function, what happened. Obviously now you had to start working from home, and that was now stage 1 lockdown, where nothing had to move to stage 2. So gradually all of us, the CEO got us all to work from home. It was all just mails, calls, making conference calls, etc., to just organize and reorganize with our stakeholders, that obviously we had to inform them, we had to let them know, well, this project or this meeting, it can't be taking place anymore, and all of that we had to kind of do from home. By the time we went to stage 2, it was easier for us with the limited number of people we could have within the gallery was 10 under stage 2. So when that happened, it became a situation where the CEO felt, okay, we're gonna open up so that we can essentially from inside just ensure that we adjust our programs so that it is, we were guided by the regulations, obviously under the state of emergency for stage 2, and then we were only allowed to have 10 people within the space. And that we were able to do with controlled numbers at the door. So people, we had to put up signage, don't get this close, 1.5 meters closer to the artwork, for example, within social distancing for people. And then when they're coming in at the door, they had to go through the temperature testing, they have to sanitize their hands, all of us, everybody who comes in has to go through that. So that became like our norm. I mean, I'm sitting alone in the boardroom and I'm without a mask, but you can't move in the passage without a mask. So that started happening, and it allowed us room to basically just reprogram our program to see how we don't disadvantage the artists and how we could then enliven, how we move it forward, basically.
Well, so, I mean, you are one of the lucky institution within the Southern Africa that is open. I'm sure in Namibia, most of the art institutions are open, as you are saying. Mm-hmm. Ourselves here in Zimbabwe, we are still on lockdown, and our institutions are still closed to the public. I'm sure the same in South Africa. We had conversations, Instagram conversation with Storm, who is at the Zeitsmoker. And we also had another meeting last week. Yes. They're also still on lockdown, and the institutions are still closed. What I would like to understand is what's the difference between now, after lockdown, and before lockdown, with regards with their audience coming in? Has the number dropped or has the number increased?
The numbers have dropped. I think people are nervous to come to the space. But what we have done is that our programs, anything that we needed to do, whether we want to offer an exhibition opening, for example, we had to extend one of our major exhibitions for the year, which was it was a reflection on our 30 years of independence. All of that, it was during lockdown, so the lockdown period kind of lapsed the time for the exhibition, so we had to extend that, and it meant that we had to go to virtual platforms like our website, so the exhibition moved online. So all of that we had to migrate to these online platforms, and then inform our stakeholders and our audiences that those are platforms for engagement with us moving forward. So even our exhibitions with external exhibitors that needed to take place, I mean, international exhibitors that were to come from South Africa, Norway, all of that, we had to tell them, okay, we're gonna move your exhibition to next year since we can't receive anything from you this time. But obviously, to not disadvantage our local visual artists, we said we want to make sure that the exhibition, if someone, even a collector, for example, wants to come in and look at the work to buy, we don't want to disadvantage them through having this lockdown on our doors, so that they can buy virtually online, or they can physically come into the space, look at the work, and then purchase. So that was the idea for it. So all of our exhibitions are going to, I mean, tomorrow I have an exhibition opening. It's taking place 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's going to be a virtual opening plus within the physical space.
Well, you're talking about the virtual exhibitions. Do you think virtual exhibitions are going to be the future? And if they're going to be the future, what do you see your real exhibitions taking place at the gallery? How do you differentiate the two? And also explain to me the traffic of those that are visiting your exhibitions online. Is it growing? Can you hear me?
I don't know if you can silent on your end.
Hello? Hi. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Yes. Can you? Hello? We can't hear each other.
I can hear you.
Now you can hear me. So can I repeat my question? Or you want to respond to the question? Oh my God.
Raphael?
Yeah.
I was saying I wish to answer the.
Yeah. How is your internet reception in your boardroom? Oh, wow.
Question that you asked, whether you feel this migration, would you like me to answer on?
Yes. Oh, wow.
Is talking, meeting is now streaming live.
Yeah.
Yes. Would you like me to answer that?
Yes.
I think that has been something that needed to happen. I think the fear obviously is artworks losing its value when you can have access to it as much just like that on a website. But, and then the value of people moving into a space and having that personal encounter with an artwork, it removes that. But I certainly believe with pandemics like this, and we don't know how we're gonna continue moving forward, but I see virtual platforms and doing exhibitions online particular, even for artists. One of the things that we had to do was make sure that we don't lose our international audience, which are basically primarily the ones that purchase our work. So we wanted to avail that opportunity for our artists, but then also to help our artists so that they could learn how to position themselves within these social media, opening websites for themselves. And that is a practice, that is part of our response, how we're gonna try and assist our artists in this time, so that it can be something that they continuously have moving forward.
How has been the gallery dealing with the new reality or the new norm that we now have, social distancing, sanitization, temperature checking, and to make sure that at least wearing of masks? Are the audience coming in wearing masks?
Yes.
And how have you been able to deal with this situation?
So the gallery basically has put down directives of, if you want to enter the space, these are the requirements. So right at the door before you come in, you are required to wear a mask. So we had to disseminate this information as soon as possible, guided obviously by the state of emergency guidelines, which require everything that you just mentioned. So an artist or any stakeholder cannot enter the gallery without a mask. Like the security can basically say, no entry until you put on a mask. Obviously, the gallery has masks on premises to assist those or our artists, for example, who would show up or that we know we have an appointment with that would appear without a mask. But it is a requirement. They cannot enter without a mask. We had to do markings, demarcating our entire gallery spaces. If you're in the space, you cannot go this close to the work. So we have these black markings with X's that, you know, it comes across very unfriendly. But I think for anybody who wants to come into the space, unfortunately, you have to abide by that. We don't want you sneezing into the work, for example, you know, that still needs to be handled. And the sanitizing happens at the doors. All of our employees inside literally had to go through a training, how to use their mask, how to wash their hands. The HR office had to make sure that we enforce that from the ground up towards our audiences. And that is the practice. Like I said earlier, we can't go into the passage without wearing a mask. Like I took this off because I'm by myself in the boardroom. So it's an expectation that this is the practice in the space and that we are accepting this as the new normal.
As an institution, which is a public art institution, how have you dealt with just assessing the impact of COVID-19 before and after you have opened to the public? Have you really managed to assess the losses or whatever impact of the COVID?
So I think that the biggest impact that we would have experienced is the responses we've had basically from our visual artists, because the comments have very much been, is the exhibition still happening? Is our work still gonna sell? There was a deadline to the exhibition. They can only be paid sold works after the exhibition comes down. Are we gonna receive money? So we felt the crux of it is very much on the artists. They felt it mostly because now if the exhibition is under lockdown, how do they still sell? How do they still have a livelihood? How does this still happen? Because our procedure is 10 days after an exhibition comes down, the artist needs to get paid. So therefore, what the gallery has then done is we looked at it, how do we respond to this? How do we assist our artists moving forward? And one of the programs that we came up with was an exhibition. Obviously, it's called What's Your Story? But it is a response to how we're gonna assist our artists in this time of COVID and moving forward, where we said, partner with a NAGAN. We want you to basically create for us an artwork, but we're gonna give you a honorarium fee, which is monetary that comes to them. We're gonna provide art material to you for you to be able to create this work. And then we're gonna put it up on the exhibition physically in the space as well as on the virtual platforms. But in return, we want to document your process of creating so that we have material that we can continuously keep our virtual platforms alive. Ultimately, the plan is that we can have this work shown on our national broadcasters where people can see artists in their making processes. So that is part of the response that we are working on. And then the National Arts Council has recently also received money from the director, the Ministry of Education, of 5.5 million, whereas we are able to be recipients of this fund, which will aid us also in executing this response that we want to do to the artists. So all of the exhibitions for our local artists that can have, we've received 150,000 from now the National Arts Council that we can also use towards this aid, whether it's the amount of money we give or the art material we can provide. We want to make sure that this type of response is you have artworks that take place in physical spaces and not just physically in the exhibition, you know. We want to make sure that the artists can have freedom, that they're not limited to, this is the resources I have and this is what I can produce with. So that is one of our responses basically to how we are trying to now say, this is what the artists have experienced. It's been challenging. So we're gonna try and see that we can assist them in this way so that, you know, this is how I see it. At the end of the day, if the artist creates work and it sells, we both win, because we as an institution wouldn't exist if they're not creating and we can't show their work. So it's finding best possible solutions to put their work out there so that they still have an opportunity to keep selling their work. And for us,
well, I mean, looking at your situation and our situation and possibly our neighbors in South Africa, who are also still in lockdown. Our exhibitions are still in quarantine, and we are battling now, working with designers to be able to come out with an online exhibitions. And it's not an easy situation that we are caught in. We are now caught in.
Yeah.
What would be your advice for institutions like us whose exhibitions are still in quarantine, and other museums in South Africa, they cannot even access the exhibitions? We are lucky that at least we can access, as staff members, we can access the gallery, but we are also busy trying to see where repairs are needed, renovations are needed. So that's what we are busy. What advice can you give in terms of preparing to post-COVID-19?
I think the positive that has worked for the gallery, for us in particular, was that we were in a process of digitizing our collection. So we had that in mind already, and we were working with photographers and works. Each and every work that comes into the gallery was kind of being photographed. So that was the positive, that by the time we were able to open up, by the time we went into lockdown, we had images of works for the catalog of the exhibition that was currently at the time in the physical space in the gallery, and we could use those images for the catalog to take our exhibition online onto our website. So now it's like an online shop on our website that's open, where you can just go in and shop as you would if you were to come into the gallery. So I would say that that practice of moving towards a digital platform with everything. I mean, currently our emails are being archived onto the cloud. You know, it's that type of thing, so that there is a way of retrieving information if there comes a need for it. And I think that is where the National Art Gallery has been, to kind of move towards that, gravitate towards that. But now with the lockdown, it kind of just, it aggravated it. It became like it needs to be a lot more speedier. So now, by the time we were opened up at that time, because our work was not in quarantine, or our institution was not quarantined down, we were able to get the photographer in. The collections exhibition immediately got photographed. You know?
Okay, looking at the
and then that's open for the public right now for viewing. And
yeah, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I think moving towards platforms like for example, the virtual opening that we're going to be doing for tomorrow's exhibition is a live Facebook. But we're also making sure that we record this opening beforehand in case any technology fails us. We have a backup that we can put on for anybody who is unable to be physically in the space for that live opening. So it's trying to make sure that what do you have, what don't you have, how are you going to make sure that you don't disadvantage the person who chooses to be in their physical space or their home space, their safe environment, but who want to engage with you on these platforms. I think that has been key for us. So we are trying to look at it both physical space and online space, and it's not so much focused so much on the physical space only.
What does cultural work mean to you?
Oh, wow. So that's such a nice question. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Cultural work, I think it's everything we've been born with. It's indigenous knowledge depositories that rest from my great-grandmother, and knowledge that's passed down to me, and what I know and how I can create, and what other artists can use to create, and how we communicate through what we know. So it can be storytelling, it can be the visual arts, it can be designers. You know, I mean, during lockdown, everything was art that we're doing. The couches we were sitting on, the cups of mugs that we were drinking out of, all of that is art. It aided us through the lockdown. And I don't know if people don't see the relevance, the value of what we as cultural producers produce at the end of the day. What you saw on TV, the movies you were watching, all of that is part of art. And I mean, if you can't appreciate art now in this time, it keeps people alive. It gives people hope. If you see a new mural going up, it becomes a new thing because you've stopped seeing people on the streets. You know, so you start appreciating these physical, I don't know what you call it, these physical moments that you engage with. And I think for me, that is cultural work, that's cultural production. It has to come from in here. It comes from there, because you translate what you are and who you are and what you want to communicate. You translate that into a physical, tangible object. Sometimes it's just talking about it. Sometimes it's creating an actual work. And we want artists like that. What's your story? That's what we want them. What they've been going through, what they see now, where their minds are. We want that. We want to document all of that. I think it's important to have that. What does
Okay.
cultural work mean to you? Sorry that I'm posing the question back to you.
Well, I mean, cultural work to me, it really means everything.
Yeah.
You know, as an African person,
Yeah.
culture has been part and parcel of my life.
Yeah.
So cultural work is actually realizing that
Mm.
part and parcel of who I am as an
Yeah.
African person.
Correct.
Yes.
It's our
So
history, it's our heritage.
exactly.
It's
So
our
now
music.
when you're talking, it's our history, it's our heritage.
Yeah.
Our history, part of our history and heritage is locked up in the so-called museums in the West.
Oh, you can say that again. Yes.
What is your thoughts in terms of
Repatriation.
the repatriation, restitution, and all the subject that has been being discussed outside the African soil?
That is a very important question. So in 2016, I did a study abroad and I was in London for this. And my paper was based basically on the British Museum and the fact that, I mean, you take Africa, you remove Egypt, which you've regarded now as valuable in your mind, and you put the rest of Africa with an arrow pointing downstairs. I looked at that and all of my entire paper was based on how they were able to remove what they thought is valuable for themselves, put it on the main floor and remove the rest. Yet we are sitting with places like Germany, Finland, that have Namibian collections that are represented out of context, number one, out of the actual place. And now these works, I mean, you look at the catalogs that are produced for this, it's like, it would just say something like Nama headdress, but at the end of the day, there's a name for it, there's a functionality for it, and if you put it on a plate within a museum, you've completely turned it into something else that it actually isn't. And I honestly feel regarding the repatriation of the objects, we had to have our skulls repatriated, which is a very sensitive subject matter that Namibia had to deal with. But now one looks at the artworks, for example, and you can't even call them artworks, these are our design objects, because these are our rugs, our mats that our ancestors created when they had to make sure that they had a livelihood. One of the things that come to mind now immediately is how they were able to construct houses. And that's architecture. It's not titled architecture, it's been mislabeled, but one has to start looking at it as in a Nama hut is the way women were architects back in the day. So you want to make sure that those types of thinking and that type of way of producing is preserved, because it's acclimated to our culture and our climates that we live in. But then when one has to look at what needs to happen, it needs to be an aggressive process. The way France has been handling it, they have said they will return. It has not yet happened. I think it needs to become you have to say, I'm going to do it by this time. And I think instead of just saying, I'm going to give it back to you on a loan, I don't agree with that. I don't think you can loan me back what is mine.
But what do you think? Because there's an idea that some of these objects are being repatriated back on a permanent loan. What do you make of?
I don't agree with that. I do not. It doesn't make sense. You cannot take forcefully from me and give it back to me on a 99-year loan. You must give it back. I think that is my thoughts around this, and I'm not going to beat the bush about it or be diplomatic, but it must be given back, and it must not be given back on condition of this. If it comes back to me and I choose to break it, if I choose to step on it and put it under the bin, it should be my decision to do that. But I don't think you have a right to tell me you can do this or you cannot do this with the work, DESIREE. I think that would just be unfair, and that is the kind of thinking that goes around what they are expecting. We're going to put on loan, it needs to be under particular conditions. No, we created this. We know what it needs to be used for. We know we want to put it back in the place where it needs to be. We want to attribute the value that it is supposed to have. That's what we want. So you can be diplomatic, but ultimately you took it illegally. I mean, just give it back.
But this discussion on repatriation, it started a few years ago when the French president was in Ouagadougou, when he made a statement that we cannot celebrate Africa in Paris, London, New York. There is a need for us to celebrate Africa in Johannesburg, in Windhoek, in Lusaka,
Correct.
in Nairobi,
Correct.
in Harare. But this discussion has been more in the West than in the continent. What do you think the African Union should do?
Correct.
And what do you think you as a cultural worker should do to really be a catalyst to this discussion back in the continent? Because for us as National Gallery here in Harare, we were organizing the International Congress on African Culture, and the topic was supposed to be Africa Speaks, rethinking repatriation from an African perspective, which was going to take place in September this year.
I think that is
because of this COVID-19, we had to postpone, and we're yet to come out with a new date. What's your thoughts?
I would definitely want the African professionals, the way you are having these conversations, that we completely open up that conversation around repatriation and say, this is what we say, these are our works, and this is the directive that we want to give you, how these works need to be returned back to us, but when we want these works back. And I think it has to be an action that we need to take now. And the fact that we are having the conversations, they should be engaging, this is how I see it, they should be engaging with us and saying, can we learn from you some works to show in our museums? That's what they should be asking from us. They should say, can we have a mutually beneficial exhibition somewhere in 2025 where you send me some of your works, which are heritage and African artworks, and I send you some of our European works, and you can show for me in your continent what you have, and I can show what you have. That would be the better way to do it. It must become a dialogue that is open. It cannot be I decide and this is how I'm forcing it or I'm reinforcing it on you, because at the same time, I believe our collections, our education systems, they are colonized. I would want to see, the reason we want to go into documenting the artist processes is because we want to see that these inherently known creative processes, that they are revived, that they can go back into the education system, so that we don't have to apply the Western cube and the way of producing system into our new producers, because then we have re-evaluated and put the emphasis back onto what is our work, so that it doesn't have to be, oh, our work is not meaningful, that's why we are applying this new technique. I completely see that as a wrong. So for us as institutions to start decolonizing, obviously, our collections, number one, and the way we are producing, to make sure that we are what is the word? That we are reinforcing and putting the value back into our ways of producing and our heritage and our knowledge, and that we write about it. Because I think the fact that it also hasn't been written about is a challenge. It needs to be written about so that it can be studied. When the new ones go to university, I'm not studying only Rembrandt. I should be able to study Rembrandt with Medici at the same time. And I think that is important.
Well,
we have to incorporate.
Coming back to the cultural work in trying times. I know we are going through trying times in different phases. We've got the COVID-19. We've got the events that have taken place in America after the death of our brother, George Floyd. That has resulted in the toppling of colonial statues around the world, around Europe, America, and the United Kingdom. So for me, these are trying times. They are trying times in terms of provoking the decolonial subject that we've ignored for too long. And I've always said this to so many people, that we've remained passengers in our own ship. There's a need to take ownership to our narrative. So what's your thoughts in these trying times that are happening with regards the toppling of the colonial statues? And I'm sure you also still have them in Namibia. We also still have them here in Africa, but in the Western world, they are being taken down. What's your thoughts?
I absolutely agree with the way Titus Kafar has gone on this. The way that it's the removal of these monuments and reinserting back what our identity needs to be. I completely approve. I want to go that direction with it. If you go to a space, for example, we had the Writer Denkmal that was removed right in front of our National Museum, and making sure that the removal of that, if you're going to remove it, you have to bring back something that says, but this is what is Namibian now, or that you assert back a Namibian identity into that space. The complete removal of it, obviously, it adds to the erasure of history. So you have to find a balance, how you're gonna present the history with your new insertion, and what that insertion is what Namibia wants to identify with now. Currently, there's been an uprising in Namibia where cultural producers, also individuals, have been doing silent protests. So they call them silent protests, where they literally just go with placards. They're going to these statues and monuments that have been put up, and they are protesting that they don't want these up anymore. And I think it's even in today's newspaper, and I think those are things that we as cultural producers and the ones that aid these processes, that's where we need to get involved. Because if you say we're just gonna remove it and nothing else comes up there, it's an erasure of history. But it's that conversation that needs to go in with, in your removal of it, what are you positioning? How are you positioning that? And I think that needs to happen in a collaborative process. And obviously now, we, the ones that are sitting within the institutions, we have these responsibilities, because for example, as a heritage council, you have responsibility towards these monuments. So those conversations need to happen so that we figure it out. What are we going to do? My thoughts about it is, we have to insert our own identity. We cannot keep continuing and walking in the way that it's been already.
But going back to the idea of repatriation of the objects and artifacts and human remains, there's been a thought from, I would like to say, those that want to remain our teachers, that if we repatriate them back into Africa, one, you have got no museums, you have got nowhere to put them. What's your thought?
I think, like I said before, give it back to me. I will know best how to care for it. Number one, it was created by one of my ancestors. Number two, it's more acclimatized to my current climate. So at the end of the day, if it comes back and I put it in a house where I know I'm gonna, and I can keep using it, that's number one, probably even, that you're gonna know what purpose it was created for. Because I don't think in Africa we just create things for things' sake. It's not a practice that we do. Anything that is created has a meaning. There's a meaning attached to it. There is a function that someone needs to serve.
Can you give us an example of, let's say, a Namibian object, which was created for a function, and what function?
So we have, in my culture, for example, they create rugs. So it's from the wheat grass that you collect, so you can create a rug. But because they were nomadic, I mean, I come from Bushmen, and we were a nomadic lifestyle. So it had to be something that you can just roll up, you move with it. When you are resting again, when the sun is setting, it's basically the bed you lay. And I think such an object now is finding itself on walls, in white cubes, which I find very problematic. It shouldn't be hung. If you're going to represent it in a museum, represent it the way it was authentically meant to be used, and explain that, even if it means put an audio to it, explain what its function was, so that it's not misrepresented in a white cube. I think that is important.
Let's go back. I was in Namibia at some point when the repatriation of the Nama and the HARARE human remains were sent back by the German government. Yeah. And I remember meeting the Minister of Culture of Germany. She was there, and it was a very emotional and very touching moment. And when we were there, it was during the conference of your Museum Association of Namibia. Yes. It was very, very touching. What do you think these objects should be? Should they be taken by the Namites and the HARARE people for reburial, or should they be taken into museums?
Sure. So you see, this one, if, for example, I am aware of some people who have personal relationship with some of these skulls, for example, that were returned, which becomes a very private issue. So if I was the person that I know that was my great-grandfather, I would want to bury them myself. I think that is key. I would not want Namibia to engage in a practice where they receive back the skulls, and the same way the Germans have done it, they go put it for research into another museum again. Then we are doing the same thing. We are not learning. Give back to the people what belongs to them.
So it should be, because when I was there, I also engaged with a number of people And they also asked me my thoughts. My thoughts were the same, that let's put our ancestors to a resting place where they belong. Especially, like I am, as a Zulu person, whose ancestors' human remains are in the Science Museum in the United Kingdom. I would love to have a traditional ceremony of those objects after they've returned back into the country, and have a decent burial in their ancestral land.
Yes.
And be remembered.
Yes, correct.
In that same space.
I think that is what needs to happen. We've received back the whip and the Bible by Hendrik Witbooi. Hendrik Witboi's lineage is still alive till this day. Ideally, the museum would want to hold on to that, but I think the museum needs to give it back so that the family decides, we're gonna give it to you for safekeeping, or we're going to loan it to you at times when you want to show. You understand? It needs to be, because this is a person's personal thing. And I think the human remains are so sensitive. It needs to go back to the family so that you can do those ritualistic practices, which obviously is part of who you are. Because if it was taken for research, if I'm going to keep it in a museum, am I researching it as well? It doesn't make sense. So it's better, give it back to me, let me have my ceremony, let me bury my person and find my peace through that. And if there's anything you need, you can interview me, I can tell you about who, you know, and then we can look at that information that you are requiring for if you want to show that this type of a practice had taken place and that the skull had come back. You don't need to have the skull sitting physically in the museum to tell you the story. There are other ways to go around representing information without having the physical object in space.
I'm sure this is a this is a very, very emotional subject in terms of repatriation and restitution. Let's go back. I mean, you are a national art gallery that also sells artworks. What is the future of the art market in Namibia?
Oh, I would see it as a very bright future, actually. I think what our artists are able to produce now, Mr. Raphael, is exceptional. They have found voice, they have found identity, and they have found ways to represent that. Currently, if I was to tell you the exhibition that's opening tomorrow, is a young lady, Alicia Ngirishange. Alicia has background in women that endured physical abuse, and that if a boy and a daughter are born, that the value is more accrued towards the boy, and that the girl is, I mean, they don't really have regard for the girl's value. So she comes up with this, and if you look at the work, it is so powerful, because she is saying, no, but what I do is important. And she speaks, her theme that she's dealing with is created these wires. She says she's used the knowledge of creating pots with her mother, which have now been the pots that they had to cook in. She's used that same knowledge to create these physical structures of a community. So we have currently in the upper gallery physical life-size sculptures that are created from wire, paper mache, and cast, which is, when you look at it, it gives you the chills. At the same time, it makes you feel like, yes, this is strong, this is powerful. And it's a woman saying, men ask her apparently, why do you create these works? And that is immediately her identity. She is asserting herself to say, no, but I am a woman, but I can still be powerful and I am still able. It doesn't mean that, you know, because I'm a woman, I can just be discarded to an end. And I think those are the types of narratives and the types of identity that has come into Namibian work. So I honestly see it as a very flourishing market. And they have, our artists have also been able to identify what are important. I mean, there was an exhibition that took place on the rhino poaching where two men just came up and they said they want to advocate for the preservation of our wildlife. And they've put up an exhibition, created new techniques. I mean, I've never seen anybody painting with a string, you know, but they've been able to create that. And this exhibition was able to contribute financially towards the preservation of our rhinos. So our artists are participating in dialogue, not only for Namibia, but internationally. And obviously with our triennale, which was supposed to take place this year, which is now postponed it will take place next year, but they will submit this year so that it can still be regarded as triennale for 2020. But the delivery of the work will not only be next year due to the pandemic. We want to see if everything that we're going to that's going to come for the channel, because it's going to be participating on a global discourse. It's going to be on the websites. It's going to be put up everywhere, that they are able to produce a work that speaks within a global discourse. And I'm excited for that. I am completely excited. I look forward to it, because now you've already been able to see the current Reflect exhibition. It's a looking back at where you are coming from, and looking forward at what our current situation is, and also the hopes for the future. And that's why the exhibition is titled Reflect. And in this exhibition, I mean, one artist was able to tell a story through his painting of a soldier that came, asked for land on their space to bury his friend, and then it's titled Forgotten Ones, and you can see the soldier sitting with his hat down, paying homage to this gravesite that he had to create on someone's homestead. And you can see the continuation of the homestead. The kids are playing, the person is the adult female is moving in the background, but it's his memory of that is so vivid. When you look at that work, it takes you back. But then you also have the immediate documentation of, this is the corruption that's going on, or no, these are the positives we've seen. So there's also that documentation that's part of that exhibition. Obviously, there's those ones that have created works where they put, I mean, the cultural value, and you can't call it culture, it's commodification. So you have an amarok and you have a rhino in the same image. Obviously, when you look at that, you would introspect yourself. Where does my value lie? What am I accentuating with my choices I'm making? Am I focused more on acquiring my amarok, or am I thinking of these are the important things? Is the rhino more important? So our artists are engaging in different dialogues with us all the time. I want to see it as a flourishing market. It's positive for me. From mine, is a positive one where we headed.
Can I come in there and try to be critical a little bit? Because I've been coming in and out of Namibia for some time. And one, I admire the printmaking, and the great printmaker of Namibia, John Mufungejo, whose work is admired across the continent. And I always look at our permanent collection and say, why don't we have a John Mufungejo in our work, in our collection? Yes. But I've been studying and seeing a lot of what is coming out of Namibia, a lot of I would say pretty paintings and all that. But I've not seen something which is very touching like John Mufungejo has done. Yeah. And yet he is one of those that came before us, celebrated in South Africa, celebrated in Mozambique, celebrated even here. So yeah, when I come to Namibia, I always say to a lot of people in Namibia, a lot of artists, to say, because there's a lot of cry in Namibia of saying, I don't have A, B, C, D. I said, you are crying, but you are standing in still water. You are thirsty, but you're standing in still water. Looking at Katutura Art Center, which is amazing. A lot of artists in Zimbabwe, they have got their studios at home.
Yeah, yeah.
And they do not have spaces like you have. Yeah. What can you say? Do you think there are artists who are of that breed of John Mufungejo?
Oh, man. So printmaking in Namibia is part of, it's now, I would consider as part of our heritage. But printmaking in Namibia has progressed in such a way that it's become a new normal, a new modern. It's the way printmakers now are able to produce, and the colors you see and how realistic it is amazing. So I would want to take, for example, when we spoke about the colonized education system, I would want to make sure that printmaking, when it's offered, is not offered anymore just as the black, you print with black on white. It's not just a line on the cover. They must make sure that they ensure that the progression of from John Mufungejo to where it is at now, that needs to be represented in our education institutions, for example. I would want to see that, and I would want to see the writings of that, because I think if we miss documenting and writing the process, where John Mufungejo comes from, how he got into it, and his celebration in other countries and Namibia, because I believe a lot of spaces celebrate John Mufungejo, especially when it comes 1st of November, you will hear Jomo Fengeo exhibition update, Jomo Fengeo exhibition update, or artists are petitioning, they want works from us, they want to loan works so that they can do something with Jomo Fengeo, you know. So there is a lot of commemoration for Jomo Fengeo that continues. And I think documenting those in the now time with the progression is what Namibia needs to reinforce, so that the printmaking process doesn't become a process that is seen as it's dying out, is not important, is because that is from where you come. And you have to show that progressional line of what was there, who the father is, and how the others, I mean, like Papa have come in, and now we have younger ones that have come in, and to show that complete picture as a part of a collection, even in an exhibition, I think that is important. And that make sure that that is how you teach it in an institution. If it's an educational institution, that needs to be there, so that they are not taught as John Mafengeo only, and they find that, for example, as no, it's not appealing, you understand, and then they don't want to try printmaking. It must be shown the coherent full picture to see that it has a life of its own and it can still continue. And I want to see what's still going to happen with it. It makes you excited.
Well,
sorry.
Let me say that, I mean, the part of the work that John Mufungwejo did, and what Joe Mudise did, and what Papa Shikongeni has been doing, that has inspired a lot of work that is happening now in Zimbabwe, the cardboard print, which a number of artists in this country have taken that medium because of the shortage of material, because of the economic situation, and that's another cheaper way to really express yourself artistically. But I want to look at the comments that are coming from our listeners out there. James Green from the Yale University in the United States of America put up a comment and said, fascinating discussion, re-colonial statues. Have you both seen this example of Memento Park in Hungary? So he managed to put up a website, which I'm sure we can go through. So thank you very much, James Green from the United States of America. And you also have another comment from Kestin. Haven't been following the Namibian cultural scene for a while. Have there been any talks and discussions on Namibian identity? Some tips would be great. Can you respond to that?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Kirsten. Thanks for joining us. We miss you here. So if you have not been following, even I've been out for a bit, but I try to keep in touch as much as possible. What I have seen in the time I've come back is that there was, I'm certain you are familiar with Tulipamwe. The National Art Gallery was able to take Tulipamwe and create another workshop experience. This workshop experience, Tulipamwe focuses on Namibian artists and international artists, whereas they've created Luhamoho. Luhamoho is a workshop only for Namibians. So this Luhamoho creates a platform where you can create...
What does Luhamoho means? What does Luhamoho means?
Luhamoho means togetherness. It's the same as Tulipamwe. It's togetherness. So it's that sharing knowledge. It's that I'm not a printmaker, but now I'm in a space where I can actually learn from someone who's creating at the same time to create how to make prints. It means I can work on the same work with you, Raphael. It doesn't have to be I'm independently just working on my work. It also means it gives me room to just explore myself as an artist. And I think these are the types of places where artists are able to come up with their own identity. And I think these types of places are important. At present, we have the John Mafengeo Art Center, which is being incorporated into the National Art Gallery. And these workshop spaces that are available through this John Mafengeo Art Center, obviously we want to use as a platform where artists can keep continuing having this dialogue. I think artists together in spaces are a powerful thing. When one looks at the exhibitions that have come out of such spaces, you see Namibian identity. I mean, I had seen a Coca-Cola bottle taller than me, created from cardboard. And it wasn't like a full round dimensional. It was that way, but it literally was when you would take a cutout and you open it up. So it had these open slides in between. You look at that, you're like, yes, cardboard is Namibian. That's what you want to see. But it's a modernized theme that was produced from this. So those are the types of things you look at with Namibians, and you're like, yes, Namibians are thinking. Yes, Namibians are creating. And I think the other thing also is that Namibians are intact with, they are. I believe this. They are becoming more intact with who they are. I mean, we have a work in the collection by Barbara Boca, and I was having this conversation with her recently. She's an abstract artist, but Barbara is using pigment from Namibia to paint. She's no longer purchasing from the art store. She's no longer buying acrylics. It's very Namibian. So she's in the lockdown. She was laughing. She's like, yeah, when the shops were not getting any material, I just called the ladies in Rundu, and within 24 hours, I had my different pigment dyes invented. So that is very much saying, I am using Namibian, I'm producing from Namibia. I don't have to wait for South Africa to provide art material to the art stores. I think those are Namibian identities. Coming from a desert, we're people who learn to make do with what we don't have. And I think that you can see as the theme, even in how they are producing, how artists are producing. I mean, Kirsten, Namibian themes, Namibian identity, I would definitely see it as they're making a mark, and I look forward to Triennale. I am looking forward to Triennale because that's where everybody is working towards Triennale at the moment, because that's where people want to make their voice known.
Okay. We also have another comment from anyway, it's a comment from Fadzai who said, I agree with you, Desiree, human remains. Human remains, we bury our dead. Then Kirsten says, are artists in Namibia also earning a living from art? That would count towards the flourishing of the art market too. Are artists in Namibia?
Artists in Namibia, one of our responses, let me add that on there, one of our responses to making sure that we are ensuring a livelihood, a continued livelihood for artists, is obviously making sure that we can connect them with places where they can work. While we say we want to document creative processes, we want to make sure that artists create what you call it, work for themselves. So that creative process being documented, offering workshops, that is where we want to see artists are able to be used by other spaces, financial institutions, that they can use artists to create their work or their adverts, their campaigns, that they make sure that we connect artists to this. Currently, our education system was challenged with teaching online and on TV. And I think if artists are made use of, their illustration skills can be made use of to create work, how translating the actual work onto a TV platform, for example, that's a way an artist ensures livelihood. But our core responsibility as the gallery is obviously purchasing of artworks through exhibitions for our permanent collections. So that has been one route where we are ensuring that somehow artists receive a livelihood. There is a number of galleries that have opened up now in Namibia, private galleries, which are also ensuring that artists have spaces to exhibit, to create a living from their work. In a nutshell, Kirsten, to answer your question, would we say that everybody benefits at the same pace? I wouldn't say so. But I think if you're an artist that is also actively engaging in making sure that an art gallery knows who you are and what you do, you stand a better chance of selling your work. And I think that is the idea, because even for us, we don't just want to sit and buy from works that come into the National Art Gallery. We are trying to ensure that we go to other spaces that the artist is exhibiting, that we can see what is this artist doing, going into the artist studios. That is what is currently on my schedule. I want to see what are they creating, so that you are continuously in a conversation to say, but what about this, what about that? And I think we can take your work here, let's go speak to this space so that that space buys your work. And I think that needs to be an active thing that we engage with the artists to ensure that there is a livelihood created. So I think also we providing free space for artists to exhibit, because our local artists, our Namibian artists don't have to pay for exhibition space. They don't have to pay for marketing material when they're exhibiting with us. Those are platforms that we are enabling for them, obviously, to buy for a way for them to make money. And I mean, those are existing platforms that I'm aware of. And with COVID, we had to now look beyond. How else do we ensure it?
Okay, so I would like to take some few questions, but before I take questions from our listeners out there, we've got Donna Loveday from United Kingdom from the Design Museum saying, I can't tell you how fantastic it is to see you both connecting in the way you are debating in such critical, important issues. Then Storm from the Zaid Smoker said, thank you both for an informative, important conversation. Unfortunately, I have to run and in another meeting, sending warmest regards. And thank you very much, Storm, for coming in and for listening to the conversation.
Yes.
We are open to...
Be careful.
Hello?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I am writing. Yes.
Yes, so we are now open to any questions from the listeners out there. And Kirsten says, have artists received anything from government during COVID-19? Here in Berlin, there have been some programs put not good enough to reach all lanes of debate in Parliament.
So I could probably answer Kirsten on that. I think I'd mentioned before that the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture has availed 5.5 million to the National Arts Council, and they have allocated to artists 2,000 each, which is what I even read in the paper myself. So that is for the national, that is individually, but for the National Art Gallery, they have allocated to us $150,000. Beyond that, the National Art Gallery was already in a process to see how we can assist the visual artists of Namibia. And this was in a partnership that we are putting forth for all Namibian artists, a national exhibition, which will work in a partnership where they will receive a honorarium fee. And that's on top of the honorarium fee, they will receive art material. And then obviously the finished product, we want to exhibit for them physically in the space as well as online. But then additionally to that, we want to receive, we want to document their making process so that we are able to use that material that comes, whether it's I mean, I would love to see self-biographies. I would love to see artists in the spaces doing the whole, this is how I work, guys, I'm doing this now, so that it is a self-representation, so that it's not DESIREE saying, this artist works this way, you know, so that we are engaging in that type of a process, so that the artist represents themselves, that we have this material for virtual content, but also that the national broadcasters can buy into this, so that is a way we are teaching techniques on TV. So I think that is what us as the National Art Gallery has been able to do, and the Ministry of Education obviously has allocated that, which I had mentioned earlier.
Then we've got a question from Joshua Davis. Can you talk about how the museum approaches preservation in your collection, both the physical works and the artist's narrative of creation and intentions?
That is such a powerful question. So I was employed as the collections curator, and I love my work. I completely love my work. So this is what I understand a collection needs to do. If you've just joined, if you're sitting in Germany, for example, like Kirsten is, and she wants to understand what is Namibian visual art history, she should be able to look at our collection and understand that since this year, when the works were first bought for the National Art Gallery, the people we had that were producing, it's landscape work, because there was no infrastructure in place. We didn't have cities or towns, and the surnames were this. And the progression, you should be able to see that now we are at 2000, and that there is a change in, obviously by 2000, we've had cities, so you all of a sudden don't have landscapes only anymore. You would want to see that there are physical structures and buildings in place, and that is documented, and that should be reflected in our collection. So you are reading the collection as in what the country is or what the place is that you are documenting, but also who the artists are. So you want to see this artist created this artist was able to take this technique and mastered it, and that's why you want to buy that work. Then this artist was able to take up another technique and try and master that, or this artist has taken this technique and advanced it to a different place, and then you want to represent the artist that way in the collection. collection. Another thing that we are obviously looking as a rapid collecting is when there is particular moments that are happening. Like now we have the Floyd situation and our community that has risen up. We want to see that artists have taken note of that and that they are documenting that process in their own physical way. Then we want to see the COVID that has happened, how artists are documenting that in a tangible manner as well. So when we are buying for the collection, we are taking into cognizance the moments that are happening historically, who the artists are, and obviously want to look at like a 3 to 5 year interval to say, why don't I have anything of this artist yet? Has this artist not been working? Or do I not know this artist in such a way? Or have they taken up a professional job and they are unable to create? How can we then make sure that this artist doesn't lose, you know, like their technique, their savviness to be able to see that they are in their process of, yes, I'm brimming over with this and I still want to do that. They should be excited continually about what they are making and for what they are making it. I think that's, so the collection reads in that manner. These were the artists at this time. This is what they were working on. These are the techniques they were exploring. So you want to see, these are the techniques that existed in 1947, for example, but in 2000, these are the techniques that existed. It should be able to tell you what has happened. And within a whole new decolonization that we're going to, I want to be able to see what we're ending up with. It's exciting. I want to see, especially now that you want to make sure that also the teaching of it, that you are teaching the indigenous knowledge systems so that that can be reinforced back into the artworks again. You want to see that. I don't know. I hope I answered the question.
Right. We have another question from Michele Robecki, who is in London. Removal and replacement of colonial monuments. I'm interested in your idea of insertion, or should I say correction rather than erasure of history? How would you propose to do that?
Thank you so much, Michelle, for your question. Very relevant.
It's a he.
I follow Titus Kafa. It's a he. Okay, yes. I follow Titus Kafa, and Titus Kafa, one of the works that stand out for me is he took the image of Roosevelt, who was a president in America, and then it was a male, so it was a cutout of that, and then he inserted the mother, or known to be the mother of his children, which was a Black woman. So it's that whole, you are saying, this is what you were, but this is what I am, because Titus Kafa himself is also a colored man, you know. And I think that experience that he's dealing with now is what one would say would be able to, you want to correct it, but you don't want the complete erasure, but you want to make sure that you insert what is relevant to you now, and that it is in a discussion, in a discourse with what has been existing historically. So there are some works that you would have to say, well, this work in this physical space, or as a landmark here, is not representative of Namibia is right now, but where would you then take that work? Otherwise, you would then have to put up a monument with a text to say, this was here with an image. If that is problematically disturbing you, so that you can then put position in the same space than that which emblem. I mean, like, for example, when one talks about the exhibition we want to do now for COVID, you want to make sure that at the roadblocks are such a big deal because it's lockdown, but cars are still moving. So you want to see an artist creating, whether it's a mask, a huge life-size, like the way Kunst did it, a life-size scale sanitizer. You want to see them, that they are thinking in such a way so that, because nobody will ever forget, every time they see that, they will remember this was what we had to go through in 2020 in Namibia, you know, and that the lockdown happened, but cars are still moving, and the roadblocks, I think, are key for that. We are positioned as the National Art Gallery right opposite the Robert Mugabe Clinic, who is actually the testing place in winter for COVID-19. Currently, our exterior walls are an ideal space for artists to engage with, that they can create work that speaks to that. We want to see that artists are thinking like that, and that will not be thinking, oh, inside the white cube. No, yes, we want work there, but if you're an artist that wants to branch out like that, it's room open enough for you. Administratively, we want to assist and say, create a work. Say you want it where, we will engage that person for you, get the permission for you, and you can go create there. That's obviously what we want to see. So when you say engage, part of this project, we hope can open up those conversations with the erasures and the insertions. We are hopeful for it.
Thank you very much, Desiree. And I'm sure we are getting closer. We just want to end our conversation. And well, there's been a lot of collaborations of museums in Africa with Western museums.
Yeah.
But we have not seen more collaborations between our own museums in the continent. And I've said this to Storm a few days ago that we have collaborated with museums in Bremen, in Germany. We have collaborated with museum in Uganda, but not enough is being done within the Southern African region. What can you say? What could be an ideal situation? I know that the stringent measures with customs, the transportation, the mobility of work from point A to point B has become a kind of a stumbling block for collaboration.
Yeah.
What should institutions like you, a national institute, what should you do to be able to unlock that?
This is a very interesting conversation. I was having this same conversation with my CEO the other day, where we said we need to be collaborating with other African institutions. And the one thing that the National Art Gallery has in place is, for their decentralization in Namibia, is a mobile exhibition system. So we have reproductions of our permanent collection works. And for example, if there are narratives that are depositories within Namibia and Zimbabwe, for example, then we have to engage in those and say, well, this is what I have, and this is, Raphael, what you have. Why don't we do one exhibition at the same time? And then we can, from our collection, literally take these reproductions, because obviously I would be very nervous taking any of my actual collection work to the space, I know, but then that your museum is able to experience what our work says. The Zimbabweans were able to enter into the space and say, yeah, so Namibia has the same thing. Oh yeah, like I didn't know. I thought it was only for Zimbabwe. You know, that it becomes that type of moment, because there's so many things that we are similar on, that we are not, and those similarities we can use as connections to start conversations around artworks. That's how I would see it, and I think it's something that can be done. I don't know why it hasn't been done.
Let me say that, I mean, for me, it's not about reproductions. The exhibition we did, it was about mobility and migration. It was entitled Cabo Kamala. It was with Makerere University Gallery. And it was original works of artworks that traveled from East Africa to Southern Africa, from Southern Africa to East Africa, from East Africa to Germany, to the city of General Van Tota, which is Bremen, where General Van Tota came from, who was the person who did the massacre of our ancestors in Namibia, our Tategurus in Namibia. So, and an artist from Kenya responded a performance which she did. She came out in Namibia to do a research and did a performance in Bremen, where she did a wedding dress, which was then performance from the railway station into the Stadtdasche Gallery in Bremen, and stopped the traffic, stopped the police. It was amazing, amazing. But also to really speak back to General Van Tota's city, where he came from.
Correct. Yes.
So that's what I'm looking at. We are looking at a situation where the mobility of exhibitions, you have got mobility of exhibition traveling from Dusseldorf to London, from London to Paris, from Paris to the Mori Museum, like the African remix, which was curated by Simon Jami, which traveled from Dusseldorf into London, from London to Paris, from Paris to the Mori Museum, then later on it came to Johannesburg. So that's the kind of collaboration that's, I think, we should be responding to as cultural workers, because we can only unlock this ourselves, and to make
Correct.
sure that we educate through
Yes.
cultural policies with our
Yes.
government to be able to enable these exhibitions to travel, but not only travel to the West, because for us, we've got an exhibition that traveled to the Venice Biennale, and I would also want to see, when is Namibia going to have a Namibian pavilion in Venice? That's my last question.
I'm so excited. I absolutely love this idea that you've been telling me about, and I think it needs to happen for us. Yes, yes, yes. Like, if you want to do it with us, any other institution in Africa who wants to partner with, we would completely be open to exploring that route completely. Yes, and I think it's necessary. And I think it's necessary that you hear from Namibia what Namibia has to say about themselves in Zimbabwe and in Botswana and in South Africa, even in Egypt. I would love to see that. And your question is, when is the Namibian pavilion opening up at the Venice Biennale?
Yes.
I want to run that. I want to. It's my personal desire to run that. And it's something that one wants to see happen. We have to, as soon as possible. That's all I can say. With the next one, I hope it's possible. I hope we're not in lockdown, but we have to. It's something that needs to happen. It's not something that is in the far future.
It's something which I'm just throwing, because I think the visibility of African countries at the Venice Biennale is very, very important. It is very important in so many ways, because you are also creating a platform for the artist, creating a platform for the country to be known, creating a platform for Africa to speak for itself, because I'll repeat this. We have remained passengers in our own ship. And if we do not realize our dreams, we are going to realize other people's dreams. So
I agree with you.
Your
I
last
absolutely. The ideal platform would probably be, I think for this collaboration within the different institutions, I would see it as the Africa Arts Association. I remember earlier this year, I was invited to have to attend it in Uganda. It didn't happen now with the lockdown, you know, but I think that type of a platform would be ideal, where we should have that conversation to make sure that the exhibitions are able to travel to each other with actual works. The Venice Biennale, you know, I've communicated with you on this. It is a burning, burning issue. It is, and it needs to happen. And especially now at a time when Namibia is constructing its own narrative visually, it needs to happen now, so that is our identity, our landmark, that we are positioning ourselves within this global discourse.
Tammy says passionate about this Southern African collaboration. Thank you so much for the conversation. Love hearing from both of you and knowing more about Namibian Art Gallery, sending strength and love from South Africa. So thank you very much to our listeners. And keep following the Harare Conversations, and my team will actually create another conversation which will be happening next week. And thank you very much for listening to us, and to DESIREE and to the Namibian National Art Gallery. Thank you very much for this conversation. And to my team here at the National Gallery, thank you very much. Tatenda, Siyabonga, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.